At 47, I learned my son thought my life was a boring, insignificant speck of dust. My name is Sarah Miller. I raised a talented software engineer who builds virtual worlds for millions, but he couldn't see the real world I had conquered long before he was born. My life now is one of quiet routines. I work as a head librarian in our small town of Oak Creek, a job my son, Leo, finds tranquil to the point of tedium. To him, my world is defined by the gentle shushing of patrons and the soft rustle of book pages. He lives 2 hours away in the city, a world of glass skyscrapers and relentless ambition. He visits once a month out of a sense of duty, I suppose, and our conversations are a gentle dance where he talks about algorithms and stock options, and I listen, asking simple questions. That Saturday, he was driving me to the city for a rare dinner at his favorite restaurant, a place so modern I feared the menu would be a tablet and the food would be served in test tubes. I was dressed in my best simple dress, feeling out of place already. Leo was in his element, one hand on the wheel of his sleek, silent electric car, the other gesturing as he explained his latest project. "It's about creating seamless user immersion, Mom," he said, his eyes flicking from the road to me. "You wouldn't believe the processing power it takes." "It sounds very complicated, dear," I said, my hands folded in my lap. I looked out the window at the passing trees, the old highway a familiar, winding ribbon. This road held older, rougher memories, ones I never shared with him. To Leo, I was just Mom, the woman who made chicken soup when he was sick and could find any book in the library. He never saw the other parts of me. We rounded a bend and Leo suddenly slammed on the brakes. The car hummed in protest. Ahead, in a dusty pull-off area beside the road, was a scene of brutal imbalance. 3 large men on motorcycles had cornered a young boy. The boy couldn't have been more than 16, skinny and terrified, clutching a backpack to his chest like a shield. The men were bikers, clad in leather vests over dirty t-shirts, their faces hardened by weather and meanness. One of them, a bald man with a thick beard, had the boy by the collar, shaking him like a rag doll. "I said, give us your wallet, you little rat," the bearded one snarled. "I don't have one, please," the boy pleaded, his voice cracking with fear. Another biker, with a long, greasy ponytail, laughed and shoved the boy from behind, sending him stumbling into the third man, who was built like a refrigerator. This one didn't speak. He just smiled a cold, empty smile and pushed the boy back toward the center of their cruel circle. Leo froze, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Call the police, Mom, now." He was fumbling for his own phone, his hands shaking. But my eyes weren't on the phones. They were on the boy's face, on the sheer, helpless terror in his eyes. It was a look I had seen before, a lifetime ago. It was a key turning in a lock I had sealed shut. 30 years ago, I wasn't Sarah Miller, the mild-mannered librarian. I was Sarah Raze Miller, the enforcer for the Iron Sirens, the most feared and respected all-female motorcycle club on the West Coast. My life wasn't quiet. It was the roar of a custom Harley-Davidson and the solid, comforting weight of a wrench in my hand. I wasn't born into that life. I ran away to it at 17, escaping a home filled with silence and disappointment. The Iron Sirens became my family. Our clubhouse was a sanctuary. We were sisters, bound not by blood but by loyalty and a shared understanding of what it meant to be underestimated in a man's world. Our president, a woman named Gloria who had the eyes of a general and the heart of a lion, taught me everything: how to fight, how to ride, how to command respect. "The world sees a woman on a bike and thinks decoration," she used to say, her voice gravelly from years of smoke and shouting over engines. "You show them the engine, you show them the steel, you are not decoration, you are the foundation." I became Raze because that's what I did to anyone who threatened our club, our territory, or the weak ones the bigger male clubs liked to prey upon. I didn't have a daughter then, but I had sisters. I had a code. It all ended one rainy night. A territorial dispute with a rival club, the Jackals, turned into an ambush. Gloria took a blow meant for me. As she lay dying in my arms, she made me promise. "This life, it's a beautiful, hard cage, Raze. Don't let it be your only life. You have a softer heart. Find it. Live a different story." I left the Sirens after her funeral. I buried Sarah Raze Miller. I used the money I'd saved, got my GED, then a degree, and became Sarah. I met a kind, simple man, had Leo, and built a life of quiet peace. I never looked back. The tattoos were covered with longer sleeves or removed. The language softened. The fire was banked to barely a flicker. For Leo. for the piece Gloria told me to find. Leo was still frantically dialing, his voice a high-pitched stutter as he tried to explain our location to the 911 operator. The bikers had now knocked the boy to the ground. The quiet one kicked dust in his face while the bearded one started rifling through his backpack. A coldness settled over me. It was a familiar cold, like an old, heavy coat being pulled from storage. The fear was gone, replaced by a calm, focused clarity. "Leo," I said, my voice unnaturally steady, "stay in the car." "What, Mom? No, the police are coming, just wait." He didn't understand. Waiting was a luxury the boy on the ground didn't have. Waiting was what bystanders did. I opened the car door. The sound was alien in the tense atmosphere, a polite, electric thunk. The bikers didn't even notice at first. I walked around the front of the car, my sensible flats crunching on the gravel. "Hey," I called out, my voice not a shout, but a sharp, clear command that cut through the air. The bikers stopped. The bearded one, who seemed to be the leader, turned, a sneer already on his face. It faltered when he saw me, a middle-aged woman in a flower-print dress. "Well, look what we got here," Ponytail laughed. "You lost Grandma, this ain't a library." They all chuckled, turning their attention back to the boy, dismissing me entirely. It was the mistake everyone made. I took 3 more steps forward, my posture straightening, my shoulders pulling back. The ghost of Raze filled my bones. I said, "Let the boy go." The bearded leader finally turned fully, releasing the boy's collar. He took a step toward me, puffing out his chest. "Lady, you need to get back in your fancy little car and drive away before you get hurt. This is none of your business." I didn't blink. I looked past him at the boy on the ground, his eyes wide with a new kind of shock. Then I looked at the leader's vest. It was cheap imitation leather. The patches were sloppy, homemade. They weren't a real club. They were Bullies, pretenders. "You have 3 seconds to get on your knees and apologize to the boy," I said, my voice low and flat. There was a moment of stunned silence, then all 3 of them burst into raucous laughter. It was a cruel, grating sound. "You hear that, boys?" the leader guffawed. "She wants us to kneel, that's a good one." He took another menacing step closer, now just a few feet from me. "Now, why don't you run along, you stupid?" He never finished the word. My movement was a blur of muscle memory. As he reached out a hand to shove me back, I caught his wrist, twisted my body, and used his own momentum to slam him face first onto the hood of Leo's car. The impact was a sickening, metallic thud that echoed in the sudden silence. He groaned, stunned. Ponytail and the quiet one stopped laughing. Their faces shifted from amusement to confusion, then to anger. "You bitch," Ponytail yelled, charging at me. I didn't move away, I moved into it. As he swung a wild, clumsy punch, I ducked under it, came up inside his guard, and drove the heel of my palm straight up into his nose. There was a wet, cracking sound. He screamed, clutching his face as blood poured through his fingers, stumbling backward and falling to his knees. The quiet one was the most dangerous. He didn't yell. He just came at me like a freight train, his arms outstretched to crush me in a bear hug. I dropped low, spinning on the ball of my foot, and swept his leg out from under him with a vicious kick to the back of his knee. He crashed to the ground with a grunt of surprise and pain. Before he could rise, I was on his back, one knee pressing hard into his spine, my arm locking his head to the side. I said, I whispered into his ear, my voice as cold as winter steel, "On your knees." From my position, I looked at the leader, who was pushing himself up from the car hood, his nose bleeding, his eyes dazed. I looked at Ponytail, who was still writhing on the ground. And I looked at the quiet one, immobilized beneath me. "The other 2, on your knees, now," I commanded. It wasn't a request. It was an order from a time when my words were law. Slowly, painfully, the leader and Ponytail shuffled into kneeling positions, their hands held up in surrender. The fight had gone out of them, replaced by a raw, bewildered fear. The scene was frozen, the 3 bullies kneeling in the dust. The boy slowly getting to his feet, staring at me as if I were a mythical creature. And Leo, his face pressed against the car window, his mouth hanging open in utter, profound shock. I kept my knee on the quiet one's back, my gaze fixed on the leader. "Your wallet," I said to him. What? "Your wallet, give it to the boy, all of you, empty your pockets, everything you have's now." Trembling, they complied. They pulled out crumpled bills, a few coins, their own wallets. The boy hesitantly took the small pile of cash and belongings, his hands shaking. "Now," I said, my voice echoing in the quiet clearing, "you will apologize, not to me, to him." I nodded toward the boy. The leader swallowed hard, his eyes downcast. I'm sorry," he mumbled. Louder, I snapped, "and mean it." "I'm sorry," he said, his voice stronger, laced with genuine shame. Ponytail and the quiet one still pinned, muttered their own apologies. In the distance, the welcome sound of police sirens began to wail, growing closer. The relief on the boy's face was palpable. I finally released the quiet one, standing up and brushing the dust from my dress. The simple, floral pattern was now smudged with dirt. I looked at the three men, still kneeling, broken not just physically but in spirit. They had been unmade by a grandma in a library dress. The police arrived, took statements, and arrested the three bikers. They were wanted for a string of petty robberies along that very highway. The officers looked from the bruised and subdued bikers to me with a mixture of respect and confusion. I gave my statement as Sarah Miller, the librarian, saying only that I had acted in self-defense to protect the boy. They didn't press for details, the evidence was clear. The boy, whose name was David, thanked me over and over, his voice choked with emotion. You saved me, how did you?" I just smiled a soft, sad smile and patted his shoulder. "Some people are worth defending, David, go home." Leo was silent for the entire 2-hour drive back to my house. He didn't turn on the music, he didn't talk about his projects. He just drove, his mind clearly racing. When he pulled into my driveway, he turned off the car and sat for a long moment, staring at the steering wheel. "Mom," he finally said, his voice quiet, "who are you?" I looked at him, my son, the brilliant engineer who built complex worlds but had never known the simplest truth about his own mother. "I'm your mom, Leo," I said gently. "No," he shook his head, turning to look at me. There was no judgment in his eyes, only a dawning, profound awe. "Those men, the way you moved, that wasn't just a lucky shot, that was professional." I took a deep breath. The wall I had built between my past and my present had crumbled on a dusty roadside. Gloria's words came back to me, "Don't let it be your only life," but she never said to deny it existed. "Come inside, Leo," I said. "I think it's time I told you a story." We sat in my living room, surrounded by his childhood photos and my bookcases, and I told him about Gloria, about the Iron Sirens, about the freedom of the open road and the weight of a wrench. I told him about the code we lived by to protect our own and the vulnerable. I told him about the ambush, about Gloria's death, and about her final wish for me. I showed him the faded, blurred tattoos on my shoulder and back that my sleeves usually hid. I showed him a single, old photograph I kept hidden in a Bible, a picture of a young woman with fierce eyes and leather-clad arms, sitting astride a gleaming Harley, a woman named Raze. Leo listened, not as a son hearing an impossible fairy tale, but as a man finally meeting the real person who was his mother. He didn't see a boring, insignificant speck of dust. He saw a mountain range with peaks and valleys he never knew existed. A few weeks later, Leo came to visit unannounced. He found me in the backyard reading. He sat down beside me, silent for a while. "I've been thinking," he said. "All my life I thought being strong meant being the smartest person in the room, having the most successful career. I thought your life was small." He looked at me, his eyes earnest. "But I was wrong. What you did, that was real strength. Not for show, not for money, but for a boy you didn't even know. That code you talked about, it's more impressive than any line of code I'll ever write." He reached out and took my hand. It was the first time he had initiated such a gesture since he was a little boy. "I'm not embarrassed by you, Mom. I'm in awe of you, both of you, Sarah and Raze." I squeezed his hand, a deep, lasting peace settling in my soul. The two halves of my life, which I had kept so carefully separated, had finally merged. And in my son's eyes, I was not less for my past, but more for all of it. The world is full of people who look one way but are another. The quiet librarian might have the heart of a warrior. The brash biker might be a coward at his core. And a son might only see his mother as mom, until the day her love for a stranger forces her to reveal the steel she's always carried inside. The lesson is this: true strength isn't about making the most noise. It's about knowing when to be silent and knowing with absolute certainty when it is time to stand up, step out of the car, and make the wolves kneel.